CM Punk may be the most controversial figure in all of wrestling. The spotlight is his addiction, his drug of choice. Nowhere in the world does he feel more at home.
Do I have everybody's attention now?
That's exactly what Punk craves. Attention. He doesn't drink. His high comes from being the main event, being the center of attention. He refuses to play second fiddle, won't ever toe the line. When authority figures try to rein him in, he lashes out.
He can be a real moody prick.
CM Punk isn't likely to win any popularity contests. Many colleagues describe him as insufferable. There is no one else in the wrestling business who has stirred up as much drama as Punk. His list of enemies could fill an entire roster.
There's that crabby side of Punk.
It's as close to hatred as you get.
No matter what promotion he's in, Punk leaves a trail of heated arguments. But it's not just superiors or other wrestlers he doesn't get along with. Even the fans got the worst of his wrath. In this documentary, we explore the psyche of a complex character, an incredibly talented man with a serious dark side.
It's hard to get to know. He doesn't talk. I would hear from everybody that, oh my God, he's livid today. He's quitting. He's this, he's that. And I'd go to him and say, what's going on? And I'd get, nothing. Everything's fine, you know? And okay, it's tough.
Many colleagues take issue with CM Punk's mode of communication. Ironically, he's actually a silver-tongued devil, one of the most articulate wrestlers of all time.
Your arms are just too short to box with God. Maybe this company will be better after Vince McMahon's dead.
Punk's mic skills are off the charts because he doesn't put on an act. He wears his heart on his sleeve and freely speaks his mind. That's what creates those unforgettable moments.
We've got similarities. We don't smoke, we don't drink, we don't do drugs
Anymore. How many times did you say, I just don't think he has what it takes, while you're lying in bed with your wife? I have the balls to say things that nobody else has the balls to say.
I wasn't paying attention. I apologize.
Yeah, you didn't pay attention in wrestling school either, jerk.
These verbal jabs showcase Punk's brutally honest and in-your-face attitude. Colleagues say the Punk you see in the pipe bomb promo is the same guy you see backstage. The shoot promo Punk is more than an act in front of the cameras. What makes him so brilliant on TV is the same thing that makes him a despised egomaniac behind the scenes, ultimately leading to his downfall.
Today I terminated Phil Brooks, CM Punk, for cause.
Punk fans value his honesty. Critics argue his truth-telling loses its merit when it's ruthless and hurtful, when he deliberately mocks or belittles others.
And we got in a big argument. I was thinking, like, the balls, like the audacity of this dude.
Punk is not a people person. Bad experiences have left their mark. He's been the odd man out too many times. Punk rubs people the wrong way wherever he goes. So he prefers to go alone.
I run because it's the only thing you can do by yourself to kind of get away from everybody.
He's turned into a lone wolf. Punk is happiest in his own company. In his mind, there's no one better than him.
I am the best on this microphone, in that ring, even at commentary. Nobody can touch me. I say I'm the best in the world, and yeah, that's a little cocky, but confidence is nothing that I've ever lacked.
He's not entirely wrong. Punk is considered one of the best wrestlers of his generation, a jack of all trades.
He's good at everything. You can go out there and have a 30-minute wrestling match. CM Punk will be great at it. You can go out there and have a 30-minute brawl. CM Punk will be great at it. You can go out there and do a 30-minute promo. CM Punk will be great at it.
The phrase best in the world is plastered all over his merch, and nobody buys into that hype more than Punk himself.
He wasn't always the best in the world, but he always believed he was.
CM Punk probably has as big of an ego as anybody I could think of that I met in the business.
Punk's oversized ego constantly lands him in hot water, but his inflated self-confidence is also dangerous.
Overrated, attention-seeking, puts a little bit too much stock in his own hype.
The worst thing that can happen to you is to believe your own hype. It's dangerous.
CM Punk calls himself the world's greatest wrestler. Critics call him an egotistical, arrogant, troublemaking crybaby. But Phil Brooks, the man behind CM Punk, calls himself deeply traumatized. June 10th, 2013, in Chicago. CM Punk is hanging out in his house when he gets a text from his mom. He hesitates to open it, then does. The content leaves him stunned. You don't give a about us. You just care about your money, your fame, and your money-hungry friends. Punk's mother had recently re-entered his life. Not out of love, but because she was broke. Punk reportedly gave her $100,000, but she demanded more. She suffered from bipolar disorder and allegedly threatened suicide on 4 occasions. She also used private information as leverage, threatening to go public with details about his high school arrests if he didn't cough up more cash. The situation spiraled out of control until Punk decided he had to cut her out of his life. In 2013, he filed a restraining order against her. Punk accused his mother of abusive, harassing, and threatening behavior. The pain over his fractured family has affected him deeply.
I think a lot of how I handled things was a trauma response from not getting what I needed when I was a kid. Broken home, no money, and the people who were supposed to take care of me never did.
Phil's childhood was a mess.
I never got what I needed from my blood family. I was always neglected. This isn't crying, this isn't therapy hour, but I watched, my parents, when my brother turned 16, buy him a new car. My brother had the opportunity to go to college and flunked out and spent all their money. I was never afforded those.
His dad had a serious drinking problem and often drove drunk.
I remember one time my dad being extremely late to pick me up. I remember driving home and he's throwing up the whole time. That was a very eye-opening experience. Okay, you drink, that's what happens to you. I'm never drinking.
Brooke later said he never really had a home. There was no safe haven, no place to feel secure. His birth family always felt like strangers.
I always just found it weird that parents could have a kid and not just 100% fully support them.
As a teenager, Brooks moved in with his best friend Shay.
He's always had a really hard relationship with his mom. They've always been really distant. They never got along.
Punk says he loved his mother, but she didn't seem to return that sentiment. He never did what he was told, had a mind of his own, and a problem with authority. This rebellious streak became a lifelong pattern. He played up his teachers too. Hardly anyone liked him at school.
Everyone's made fun of me because I have one pair of shoes and one pair of jeans and wear the same stuff all the time.
As a teenager, Phil discovered wrestling. He dove headfirst into this bizarre world where no one made fun of him for his clothes. No one excluded him for being different, because everyone there was a little off-kilter. He and his friends started wrestling in their backyard and started the LWF, the Lunatic Wrestling Federation. Phil quickly became their biggest star. They started charging admission. Over 1,000 people were showing up to their shows. Pro wrestlers in the area looked down on them and mocked them, but in the end, the amateurs completely outdrew the pros. Punk worked with his brother Michael, who handled LWF's finances. The teenagers put their own savings into the project. Together, they built up a budget of several $1,000s. But then, it all fell apart.
She stole all the money. It wasn't a small chunk of change. That's not what brothers do, man. Brothers help each other.
A few years later, Michael tried to make amends. He paid everyone back and asked for forgiveness. The others let bygones be bygones, but Punk wouldn't speak to him. To this day, he doesn't speak to his brother.
It's okay to be bitter about stuff.
Punk found a new brother in Colt Cabana. The two hit it off right away, and years later, CM Punk versus Colt Cabana matches would become box office gold in the indie circuit. Wrestling became Punk's escape from the deep pain of his broken family. His whole life revolved around wrestling. Punk put his passion above everything else, even his love life.
He is a much better friend than a boyfriend because he's so focused and he's so dedicated that wrestling always came first.
Punk built a reputation as an indie darling. During his time in TNA, he butted heads with fellow wrestler Teddy Hart. They took their animosity into the public. Then before a show, tensions came to a head in the parking lot.
I offered my hand to him, and like a wrestler, guess what he does?
Sucker punch.
Tried to slap me across the face. He got 2 shots. I hit him twice.
Punk started the fight, but ended up on the losing end. It was a falling out between Punk and TNA. They didn't want him around anymore. Punk got the boot.
Fearless, unapologetically confident. I didn't like him, but I respected him.
Despite the drama, Punk's talent kept him booked all over, but he was constantly at odds with wrestlers and promoters. Among others, he had beef with Kevin Owens, then known as Kevin Steen. The exact reason is unclear. Punk told Steen he better wear a singlet, not a t-shirt. Steen recounts what happened next in an interview.
I did the match in the singlet, and I came to the back, and I said, "Are you happy now?" He got very upset. He yelled at me, and he said I was disrespectful and all this stuff.
Before his time in WWE, Punk gained popularity in Ring of Honor, the hottest indie promotion at the time. It was here that WWE scouts took notice and wanted to sign him. Just before jumping ship, Punk turned heel in ROH. He insulted the fans and signed his WWE contract on the ROH title. But in his farewell match, he broke character. One last time, he faced off against his best friend, Colt Cabana. Punk tried to blink away his tears, but they just kept coming.
I think I loved this place. That last night was a pretty emotional night, not just for me, I mean for everybody.
Leaving was tough for him. His goodbye was incredibly emotional. He loved this place because it was the first place that was all about him, where he had everyone's undivided attention. Here, he was the center of the universe. The spotlight was on him. He was the biggest star. At WWE, it was the complete opposite. He had a very rocky start. Punk expected to be thrown right into Raw and SmackDown. Instead, he landed in the developmental system OVW.
He walked in with a real chip on his shoulder. Punk was the top guy for Ring of Honor. He was pissed beyond belief that he had been relegated to the developmental area.
Punk's ego took a hit. The scouts recognized his talent but failed to see his potential star power. That made him angry. In his eyes, no one was on his level. In ROH, he was the top dog, but in WWE, he was stuck training with the rookies. After 2 weeks of frustration, Punk chose to make the best of it.
First guy in the door every single week, CM Punk. Last guy out the door, CM Punk.
While everyone else was out partying or, trying to sleep, I was awake for 6 months, just 6 months straight.
Punk wanted to keep using his finisher from the indies, a top rope pedigree called the Pepsi Plunge, but the higher-ups didn't allow it, since Triple H used the standard pedigree as his finisher. This didn't sit well with Punk at all. Bit by bit, the rebel in him started to resurface.
Every tattoo I have tells its own story about who I am. In a war against this system.
His vision was clear. His goal? Revolutionize WWE.
I feel I have a responsibility to the younger wrestlers on the roster, the ones who aren't signed yet, in the future of pro wrestling as a whole to help make this place better and to change this place. I certainly can't change it by sitting on my couch in Chicago.
You could be a strange guy, bad communication. Folks did not know how to deal with it.
Word got around backstage that Punk was defiant and disrespectful. For instance, toward wrestling legend and trainer Tony Atlas.
I was just like, listen, man, like you come down here and I know why you were brought here. You were brought here to tell people not to do drugs and to save your money because that's something you didn't do. I go, and you're going to criticize me. They went straight to Vince and they're like, literally, we're going to get you fired.
This and other incidents put Punk's career in jeopardy. But with Paul Heyman, he had the right supporter, in the right place, at the right time.
Heyman always fought for Punk. Punk was on the list of thanks for coming and best of luck on your future endeavors.
They said, fire this kid. And I'm like, what do you mean fire this kid? I don't fire talent. I don't even hire talent. I develop talent. I worked with him and I directed him and I protected him.
Heyman got Punk on TV. The two were determined to prove the higher-ups wrong. They wanted to show that Punk really had what it takes to captivate the masses.
I don't drink. I don't smoke. I don't do drugs. My addiction is wrestling.
Punk recalls that the backstage atmosphere at the time was extremely toxic. The other wrestlers couldn't stand him.
Shark Tank, cutthroat, super competitive. Everybody looked at me like, why are you here? You don't belong here.
At the same time, his colleagues had sky-high expectations. They'd heard the rumors about this megastar from the indie scene.
And it wasn't that he wasn't good or wasn't polished, he is. But when you come in with the legend of John Henry's hammer, and you can't live up to that. So immediately, I became like, who's this guy? That's it.
Punk wasn't winning any popularity contests, but his performances were solid. That's why he got to stick around, why he kept getting TV time.
And the fact that CM Punk was getting this momentum almost rubbed everybody the wrong way because it wasn't supposed to happen that way. The attention was supposed to be on other people.
CM Punk was never considered for the main event because he didn't look like the guys in the main event. Next to Undertaker, Batista, and John Cena, CM Punk doesn't look like a credible opponent.
You look at the dude and think, oh, this is the guy that's going to go park our cars, or this is the guy that's going to steal our car, one of the two.
But it was precisely this alternative look that fans loved about him. And one thing was undeniable. Punk made up for his lack of muscle mass with other qualities.
People were still telling him, you're not what they're looking for. You don't have the look of what WWE wants. They want guys like John Cena. They want guys like Randy Orton. They want guys like Batista. They don't want guys like you. But CM Punk can make you care.
March 30th, 2008, WrestleMania 24. By this point, Punk had been under WWE contract for 3 years. Nobody thought he'd last this long without getting fired. On this WrestleMania night, he scored his first big break. Punk won the Money in the Bank briefcase, guaranteeing him a title shot.
It was the first time, I think, at least in my mind as his friend, saying, oh, they're going to go with him.
His fans were still a bit skeptical. Many feared Punk would be the first to cash in the briefcase and lose, making him look like a chump. But that was not the case. CM Punk became World Heavyweight Champion. He'd finally made it to the top. At least, that's what he thought. He may have been carrying a big title, but he was presented as a minor champion. The champion that the bosses saw as the true champion was John Cena. Punk was still far from taking the leading role.
And the very least thing he got was the proper recognition of being a champion. Matter of fact, a lot of people thought he tarnished the championship. I would pretty much say most of the locker room at that time really thought it was the wrong move.
Triple H even publicly criticized Punk's first title reign as disappointing.
The title doesn't make the guy makes the title. And I think it was kind of like the championship was trying to make him. And I don't think it works that way.
A long-standing feud developed between Triple H and Punk, but never with heated arguments, more like underlying negativity towards each other.
I knew, he never liked me. Me and him in a room together, never any good vibes. Always negative, the way he would always look sideways at me, the way he always treated me.
But by this time, Triple H was already Vince McMahon's right-hand man. His word carried weight. Vince decided that Punk should be stripped of the title. Randy Orton hit him with a punt kick in a backstage attack.
Oh my God!
According to the storyline, this left Punk unable to defend the title. In reality, Punk actually did get injured, and he handled it unprofessionally.
I had a fracture in my arm, and I kept it quiet.
Punk kept the injury under wraps because he didn't want to be sidelined. Not now, when his career was just picking up speed. When it came out that Punk had concealed his injury, management was furious.
That was a little political and a little necessary. I believe Punk had an injury that he had to take care of. And I believe that was great timing for those that didn't think that that was a great idea for him to have the title in the first place.
The gap between them and Punk grew wider than ever. Punk was earning far less than his colleagues, but he didn't care much about the money. The only currency that matters to him is attention.
There are a lot of people who just do this for money. There are guys who are hiding in the back right now, hoping that they don't get picked for a Superstars match tonight, because they just like to chill out and earn their money and just not do anything. Punk is not one of those guys.
Then Punk's career took a turn. The reason? A change in his character.
Michael Hayes finds me, and he says, Vince and I need to talk to you. And Vince looks at me and he goes, I have a challenge for you. We're eventually going to see if you can run as a heel. I have my reservations, but Michael here thinks you might be able to do it. And now I'm insulted. Now I'm sitting there and I'm going, once again, I go, what's the challenge? So I want to see if you can be a heel. And Vince, what's the challenge? I want to see if you can pull this off. I don't know. I don't know if you can pull this off. And I was just like, sit back. In 3 months, I'll be the best heel in the company.
Punk flourished in his role as a bad guy against Jeff Hardy, and he made good on his promise. In no time, he became the best, most hated heel. However, this success came with one controversial condition.
That was the first time somebody would hand me, oh, here, we wrote your promo, and it was written from somebody else's perspective about how I view the world and everything like that. Nobody could ever know what's in my brain.
Very opinionated. The more successful Punk got, the more he wanted to control what he was doing.
Punk wanted to write his own promos and demanded creative freedom. The higher-ups refused, but boss Vince McMahon quickly learned that Punk was a rebel.
Anytime anybody would hand me something just to prove a point, I would rip it up right in front of them and just throw it in the garbage. Sometimes it's on the floor. They'd be like, oh, here's your... I'd be like, hey, thanks a lot.
Punk did his own thing, and it paid off. Vince gave him free reign because the self-written promos were the best of the program.
Just like me, he had no idea what he was going to say when he went out to the ring. He was just doing it. Shoot promos that then get wrapped around into the storyline that were telling that he fervently believed in his heart that he was telling the truth.
The microphone is truly Phil Brooks' best friend in wrestling. However, he used a controversial strategy. He blurred the lines between reality and storyline, delivering so-called shoot promos. Punk brought up Jeff Hardy's real-life alcoholism on camera.
The only way you obtain this is with a prescription. You know a thing or two about prescription medication. What I don't think you realize is that you have to go to a doctor to legally obtain some. Why don't you try living a clean lifestyle?
CM Punk told Hardy about some of the things he was going to say beforehand, but not all of them. And he reportedly didn't really give him a chance to say no. Punk was dead set on delivering these controversial promos.
Jeff, look at yourself. You're a joke. And you can boo all you want. I know why you boo. You know why you boo. It's because I tell the truth. And the truth sometimes hurts, doesn't it?
Jeff Hardy went along with it, but later said he wasn't really comfortable with it. The two quickly became enemies, not just on camera, but backstage too. Jeff the professional never let it show and swallowed his anger. But after leaving WWE, he dropped the facade in a video that showed him intoxicated.
CM Punk, I think you're a nerd. You, my friend, are way too cocky, inside and outside the ring.
According to Jeff Hardy, CM Punk isn't as straight edge and drug-free as he likes to claim.
You take Ambien to go to sleep, that's a prescription if you didn't know it.
The reason why Punk works so well as a heel is simple. He knows his role of the unpopular, outcast booed person from his real life. And he excels at playing that role arrogantly. In an interview, RVD said that Punk couldn't confine that arrogance to just his gimmick. It was a part of him.
Guys who do the promos, they convince you that they really think they're the best. They're the ones that make it to the top. They're also the ones that I can't stand because I think they're crazy.
Moreover, RVD and Booker T criticized Punk for acting like a locker room leader, even though the veterans didn't accept him as such at all. Undertaker, the true leader among the wrestlers, had a serious talk with Punk. Taker criticized his arrogant behavior, the know-it-all attitude, the selfishness. He also suggested that as champion, he should dress more professionally and not walk around in worn-out jeans and t-shirts while representing the company. Punk's response, of course, was rebellious. He said that he would wear what he wants to wear. The differences between them persisted for months. The Undertaker didn't respect Punk. But when the two faced off in a feud, that changed.
I know for a fact that Punk earned the Undertaker's respect inside the ring, which the Undertaker never thought he was going to give to Punk, and admitted he was wrong.
In the ring, Punk was beyond reproach. His wrestling skills impressed even the legends on the roster. He was athletic, had outstanding timing, and a good feel for the audience. He also showcased innovative moves like his finisher, the go-to-sleep. For a while he bragged that he came up with the move himself. Later he admitted that wasn't true.
And CM Punk, how did you come up with your finishing move?
I stole it.
The GTS was a move invented by Japanese wrestler Kenta. He was angry at Punk and lashed out against him on Twitter. Punk had managed to anger a wrestler he'd never even met before. In 2010, he got into a conflict with Chris Jericho. Punk was furious because Jericho was watching the Hockey World Cup shortly before a tag match instead of helping to plan spots in the match. Punk found it unprofessional, and since it didn't seem like Jericho wanted to take part in the process, Punk didn't tag him in at all during the entire match.
And he worked the whole match himself. And I was like, you son of a... He's like, you're so unprofessional because you guys watched the hockey game. Like, dude, you're unprofessional for not tagging me in. People might have paid money to see me today, and you robbed that from them. And we got in a big argument. And I was thinking, like, the balls, like the audacity of this dude. He doesn't care. He doesn't care what anyone thinks.
Some colleagues got the impression that Punk was even deliberately trying to be disliked and make enemies. In the ring, he mastered this like no other. As a radical atheist, he founded the Straight Edge Society cult.
One nation, under Punk, indivisible, with integrity and sobriety for all.
Was I trying to be wrestling Jesus? Yeah, absolutely, because it was extremely offensive to a lot of people.
In this role, Punk mocked religion and faith and imitated preachers in his sermon promos.
Ladies and gentlemen, at home, if you feel the need to put your hand on the television screen, you go right ahead and do that.
Many fans were beside themselves, throwing objects into the ring and hurling insults at Punk, which is exactly what Punk wanted to achieve. Exactly what he had promised Vince McMahon.
There was nobody who was getting as much heat from those people as CM Punk was. He was the most hated man in the company.
I had a grandmother jump the rail to slap me in the face. And the quote was, "You are not Jesus Christ and you'll burn in hell for your sins." And that was the desired reaction. I want people to slash my tires, set my car on fire, chase me out of town with pitchforks and torches.
Wrestling needs good heels, because the more the audience hated Punk, the more they cheered for his opponents. Fan favorite Rey Mysterio had a big moment when he won against Punk in a hair versus mask match. Punk had to shave his head. It was sweet satisfaction for the fans. As unpopular as Punk was with the audience, he was inversely popular with the ladies. As a teenager, he gave himself the name CM Punk. CM stands for Chick Magnet. And throughout his career, he lived up to this nickname. Shannon Sprill, Natalie Slater, Tracy Brookshaw, Maria Kanellis, Kelly Kelly, Mickie James, Becky Bayless, Allison Danger, Lita, Beth Phoenix. Then he met his future wife, wrestler AJ Lee. She says she's drawn to Phil's rebellious side.
It's scary and uncertain to kind of go against the grain and do your own thing and challenge authority. And so you kind of just have to have the guts. And he has that. He's one of the few people that has that.
CM Punk had one big goal in his career. He wanted to be in the WrestleMania main event, the biggest match of the year. He wanted the brightest spotlight in wrestling to shine on him. He worked day and night for this dream, but it was a dream he couldn't fulfill, and it ate him up inside.
Frustration level was at a 10, maybe an 11. I don't think there was anybody in the company that was more pissed off. I could detail so many different things, but a big one was Miz being in the main event of WrestleMania. There wasn't a better bad guy in the business than me. And to watch somebody literally just get handed this is a monumental slap in the face.
Punk still wasn't the top guy, still wasn't the big star. It made him angry that he wasn't on magazine covers, not in the movies, not on the WrestleMania poster. In his dissatisfaction, Punk flirted with the idea of leaving WWE. He wanted to go back to his beloved indies, where he was the real deal. While still under contract with WWE, he tried to buy Ring of Honor. He even texted the owner asking how much he wanted for the company. The owner wasn't interested in selling. Vince McMahon also caught wind that Punk was frustrated, and he made him an incredible offer.
One of the writers came up to me with a big smile on his face. He goes, "You're going to love this. They're going to give you a microphone and they want you to air your grievances." And I just looked at him and I was like, well, surely you can't be serious.
Management told Punk that he could actually say anything he wanted. Vince's idea was for Punk to vent his frustrations, hoping it would make him feel better. That's exactly what he did.
And I'd like to think this company will be better after Vince McMahon's dead, but the fact is, it's going to get taken over by his idiotic daughter and his doofus son-in-law and the rest of his stupid family. Maybe I'll go back to Ring of Honor. Hey, Colt Cabana, how you doing?
Punk was unapologetically himself, wreaking havoc on the mic, but he crossed a line when he wanted to tell a private story about Vince McMahon.
This whole bully camp?
Vince McMahon guessed which story it was and actually had the microphone deactivated. The production team was instructed to make sure Punk's voice couldn't be heard at all. That's why the camera microphones in front were also muted. The McMahons didn't know Punk would shoot so hard against them, but they took it in stride. After all, they had given him the opportunity to get his frustrations off his chest. But Punk claimed that it wasn't just his frustration, but also the frustration of his colleagues.
I am CM Punk, and I am the voice of the voiceless.
Vibe backstage was so indescribable, like just people freaking out, like on eggshells.
You felt it, you know, like I'm getting goosebumps thinking about it right now.
Backstage colleagues praised him for his guts. For some, he was actually speaking truths they had never dared to utter. CM Punk had more media appointments than ever before. He managed to bring a certain credibility back to wrestling. Ticket sales went through the roof. It was palpable that Punk wasn't just putting on an act, he meant business.
Mr. McMahon, he's a greedy, soulless...
These real shoots evolved into a legendary feud, Punk versus Cena. For years, the two had been in a real-life rivalry. Punk wanted to be the best, and Cena was always standing in his way. For instance, CM Punk was supposed to win the 2008 Royal Rumble, but then John Cena came back from injury in record time and threw a wrench in the works. When Punk first worked with Cena, he made it clear right off the bat who was boss, who determines the move sequence in the match. In other words, who does the so-called calling.
Mike Chioda was the referee, and I remember locking up with John, and he started going, double drop down, hip toss. I was like calling all this shit, and I remember just looking over at Chioda, and I go, Mike, who's calling this match? John just went, oh, okay. It's like John Cena, you know what he does. He does the 5 things, and like, that's it.
At Money in the Bank 2011, CM Punk reached the pinnacle of his career. He was in the biggest storyline for the biggest title. People were coming to the arenas and tuning in to see him. He surpassed John Cena in merchandise sales. It was Punk's golden summer. He was now the top star.
CM Punk was without a doubt the hottest talent in all of pro wrestling.
Cena versus Punk. One of the biggest matches in the history of WWE.
Punk says he's never been as nervous in his life as he was that night. For many, this showdown is considered the best match in both of their careers. They created something extraordinary.
My God.
CM Punk had now truly reached the top of the wrestling world, but for him, it wasn't enough. This peak wasn't high enough, because it wasn't the WrestleMania main event. From there, it was all downhill.
You gonna punch me in the face, or do you gotta go ask your wife permission first?
I would, but I know where that hand's been.
CM Punk was now the absolute fan favorite in front of the cameras. His promos were original and once again peppered with real jabs.
Hey everybody, the click's back! Which is kind of ironic because click is the noise the audience's remote control makes every time Kevin Nash pops up on their TV screen.
Kevin Nash and CM Punk didn't get along particularly well, so Punk came up with a few special lines to hit Nash where it hurt.
OMG, Kevin Nash, WTF, thought he was dead, LOL. And here you are, live and in living color. It's just your career that's dead, right?
Later, Nash said he almost lost his cool.
I'm thinking to myself, like, I'm scripted not to say anything, but you know what? Either you apologize to Mr. Nash, or I'm going to smack you in the mouth, or we can go. I'm thinking to myself, like, don't do it.
There's that crabby side of Punk that we all know, that you all see at the airport trying to get an autograph.
We're seeing the true colors of CM Punk.
And that's real, and that comes out in those microphones.
Throughout his career, Punk repeatedly had unpleasant confrontations with fans. Punk was very dismissive when people asked him for autographs or photos. Then, an incident made headlines that painted Punk in a very bad light. CM Punk went into the crowd during a show, thought he was being attacked, and knocked down an innocent fan. First with the back of his hand to the face, then he hit him in the jaw. The attacked fan's name is Charles Schmidt.
Next thing you know, he comes at me, pops me, and my glasses go flying, and I go down to the ground.
These images show minor injuries, and Schmidt says Punk's attack damaged his glasses.
Did somebody touch him? I didn't see anybody touch him, but there were a rush of people.
Police filed a report, but the fan declined to press charges. Various media outlets, including CNN, reported on the incident.
Schmidt says he is a little upset with Punk, but really, he's just shocked about how his night of entertainment ended with him getting smacked on live TV.
It just doesn't seem like it would be something that you'd do.
In the fall of 2012, CM Punk injured his knee, and he noticed something surprising. He was happy about the injury because it finally afforded him a much-needed break. But things turned out differently.
Vince calls me. Hey pal, her surgery went good. We just announced on the website, 3 weeks you're wrestling Ryback in a TLC match. It's the first Raw of the year, it's gonna be huge. And I was just like...
Punk developed wrestling burnout, and above all, he had no desire to work with Ryback. In Punk's eyes, he was stupid and couldn't wrestle safely.
The Ryback stuff, that took 20 years off my life. I'm already beat up and then I have to wrestle steroid guy. First night out, gorilla press through a table, misses the tape. Dumps me on the concrete, me up 4 weeks.
CM Punk doesn't suck up to people, he criticizes those who do. The Rock, for example. Behind the scenes, the atmosphere between the two was tense. The Rock had caught wind that Punk regularly took shots at him. He insulted him, said he always told the bosses what they wanted to hear. Punk also criticized his movies and scoffed at his Hollywood success. But Vince McMahon put the two in a heated rivalry with each other. The Rock had his team from Hollywood with him, writing promos for him, and for Punk too. But Punk didn't want words put in his mouth. He had no desire to be told what to say. The Rock eventually accepted this, but the change of plans created negativity. The underlying problem was Punk's deep frustration that The Rock got to be in the WrestleMania main event, and he didn't. Jealousy. Vince McMahon had something else in mind for him.
Oh, The Undertaker needs to beat somebody at WrestleMania. Here you are. I had ideas to actually build it up and make it look like a threat, and I never felt I was. I was disappointed in that.
Out of frustration and rebellion, Punk crossed the line in a match on Raw. In a highly praised match against John Cena, he performed a pile driver. The Undertaker, The move had been banned for years due to the risk of injury. Vince McMahon greeted them both with a lecture backstage.
I feel like I'm constantly fighting, whether it's opponents in the ring or the office, to get what I want.
Another point of frustration was his dietary change. Punk became a vegetarian and regularly complained about WWE's backstage catering. There were hardly any vegetarian options.
And he's like, yeah, I'm not going to eat meat anymore. It's like, well, what are you talking about? Like, this is what we do after the matches. There's nothing else open besides like McDonald's and Wendy's and fast food. You're going to try to be a vegetarian now?
Punk's face-off with The Undertaker at WrestleMania was the match of the night. At SummerSlam 2, CM Punk delivered what many fans considered the best performance against Brock Lesnar. The match and the feud thrilled the audience.
Punk thinks just because he tapes his hand and takes MMA classes for beginners at his local gym that he's a tough guy. Well, he's not.
After 2 amazing performances, Punk was sure he would be in the main event at WrestleMania next year. But Vince planned Batista versus Randy Orton as the biggest match.
He did become, very disgruntled. Those are things that happen because at the end of the day, the person that runs this place, owns this place, and is responsible for this place will make their decision, and that's the way we're going to go.
Out of frustration, Punk started bossing around younger talent arrogantly. For example, Rusev.
Probably wasn't too much fun to be around. I was tired. I was sick. I was mad. I was feeling repressed.
During this phase, Punk stopped talking to Vince McMahon. Before this, he still had the energy to complain when something didn't sit right with him. Now there was radio silence. But on the inside, Punk was fuming.
There's a lack of communication. I think I can legitimately say that, Punk has some degree of lack of communication skills. He's pretty much a loner.
The relationship between Punk and Vince was in tatters.
Didn't really like the other guy that was in charge. But the truth is, he didn't really get along with the current guy that's in charge either. That wasn't like they were pals.
January 27th, 2014, the time had come. The volcano erupted.
I went into their office and I was like, I'm going home. And they're like, what do you mean you're going home? And I was like, I'm going home.
And I just looked Vince in the eye and I said, I do not love this anymore. I have zero passion for this and I don't want to do it anymore.
Vince responded with a suggestion. Punk should win against Triple H at WrestleMania. But Punk refused, turned to Triple H and had some harsh words for him.
I do not need to wrestle you. You need to wrestle me. I do not want to wrestle you. I seriously resent you for not putting me over 3 years ago when you should have.
Stubborn as he is, Punk stuck to his guns. He wanted the WrestleMania main event. Triple H tried to mediate. He said that Punk was one of the company's most important stars, but Punk had a counter for that too.
I turned to him and I said, tell me that I got paid the same amount of money as you, Brock, Cena, Rock. He had nothing to say. He didn't say anything.
The salary figures made clear what Punk had known all along. Management didn't see him as a top star. Many earned more than him. Punk left. Vince hugged him goodbye, with tears in his eyes. Triple H shook his hand.
It's my regret that we couldn't get past all this stuff with him. But if he didn't want to be here anymore, if this wasn't his passion anymore, then he shouldn't be here. You can't do this job if you don't love it.
He was done. Burned out, I guess is the best way of putting it.
I got a text like maybe 4 days later, and Vince was like, you ready to come back to work? And I was like, it's been 4 days. And then he told me he was suspending me for 2 months, and I was just like, cool. Of course, the suspension ends exactly like the day after WrestleMania. I was like, oh, I'm being punished. I can't do WrestleMania. Fine.
When Vince realized that Punk really wasn't coming back, he was disappointed and angry. He ordered Punk's name to be erased everywhere, never to be mentioned again, and to deny him any attention.
When you walk out, no matter what the reason, then you're walking out on not just the company, you're walking out on the audience as well.
The audience did indeed feel let down. At every show, fans chanted CM Punk. Production staff tried to dial down the crowd noise for TV. In 2017, 3 years after Punk's departure, even though The Rock was in the ring, the audience was still screaming CM Punk. The Rock, known for his authentic interaction with fans, called Punk live in the ring. Punk later said that he was in the elevator when the phone rang, about to walk his dog. He didn't pick up. But just the mention of Punk made Vince McMahon lose it. All hell broke loose behind the curtain. Colleagues informed Punk about it through texts.
A couple people backstage were like, it's crazy back here right now. There's a couple broken headsets. There's shit flying everywhere.
There was a reason for Vince's renewed anger. After his departure, Punk had spoken extremely disrespectfully about him, his company, and his employees, to such an extent that there were later defamation lawsuits. On his best friend Colt Cabana's podcast, Punk trash-talked his former employer. The list of accusations was long. Upper management didn't care about wrestlers' health. They only cared about the company's image.
The WWE doesn't do anything to protect the wrestlers. They do things to protect themselves. They don't let everybody know that they're doing all these fantastic things for concussions for the boys. They do it so it looks good on them in the public.
Punk portrayed himself as an oppressed hero. He also praised his creative ideas.
The Shield was my idea.
The Shield members themselves found this statement from Punk rather ridiculous.
CM Punk made the Shield, yeah. Okay. The only thing he made was that Pepsi tattoo on the shoulder.
Punk made many more claims and accusations that later turned out to be false or exaggerated. Vince says he never listened to the podcast, but Triple H informed him about the accusations.
I heard it was a number of things that he said that it's his point of view.
Right.
You know, and there's always two sides to every story.
Right.
Steve Austin also asked Triple H about Punk's statements in his podcast, especially regarding Punk's booking.
The decisions that were made were Vince's and were made to help him. And then they didn't work out for whatever reason. But I don't know, he held a grudge on that.
Punk was starting to weave plots that negatively influenced his friends that were still working for WWE.
He didn't want people who were his friends to stay and work for the company because he felt like it was it's some sort of betrayal to him.
Punk was so angry that he even sorted out his friends. He gave them an ultimatum. His friends should leave the company, otherwise he would end the friendship.
He wouldn't even explain to his friends why he was so resistant to continuing that friendship. I never got an answer out.
Were you friends up to that point?
Yes. We were friends till he left.
Chris Jericho confirmed these statements from Rollins. Many of his friends lost all respect for him. Punk's former colleagues could only shake their heads at many of his statements. For example, Punk claimed that the backstage atmosphere had been terrible. Lots of envy and hostility. Yet in the eyes of many wrestlers, he was considered one of the causes of this toxic atmosphere.
Would you like to see Phil Brooks back in WWE?
Oh, Philly Phil, stay away. Stay away, you cancer. Get away from me forever. I don't like Phil. He's a jerk. Everybody in the room, he's like, oh no, did he say that? Yeah, no, he's a jerk. Come on, we figured it out over there. We knew it over here. I don't want him back. Go do something else.
In hindsight, Punk admitted that he let his anger guide him in the podcast. He vaguely said he regretted some of his past behavior.
I know I wasn't the easiest guy to deal with, and I wasn't the nicest guy to deal with.
Still, the podcast rant blew up in his face. He criticized and insulted the doctors. The medical care was supposedly abysmal. The doctors had allegedly put his life at risk through negligent handling of an infectious disease, a staph infection. He also claimed to have suffered a concussion. The doctors disagreed. Punk had problems with nausea, so the doctors gave him antibiotics. However, his body didn't handle the medication well. An embarrassing mishap at SmackDown was the result.
They Z-packed me to death so much that in December I shit my pants on a SmackDown. Because that's what antibiotics do to you. I had diarrhea for 3 weeks. Oh man, was I nervous I was going to shit. Yeah, I was like, this is going to be my new gimmick. You know what I mean? Vince is going to be like, you're going to get all white gear. Oh, God. You know?
Ringside physician Chris Amann sued Punk for his defamatory statements, and he sued Colt Cabana for publishing the podcast. According to various media reports, Vince allegedly financially supported the company's doctor in the lawsuit against Punk. Some juicy details came to light in court. Punk broke down in tears several times during his testimony. He admitted to never being officially diagnosed with a staph infection. More discrepancies came to light. Punk admitted that his statements were partly inaccurate or exaggerated. In the end, Punk and Cabana were acquitted as a man couldn't prove sufficient damage. Punk and his wife were relieved. Both were crying. But the legal dispute still cost him dearly. Among other things, his friendship with Colt Cabana. Fans are still confused about how CM Punk and Colt Cabana became bitter rivals after being best friends for most of their adult lives. Money and lawsuits tend to destroy friendships, and that's exactly what happened here. Punk had promised to cover Cabana's legal fees. Later, however, he withdrew this offer. According to rumors, Punk was angry at Cabana for not ending his friendships with WWE colleagues. Punk already saw them as enemies during the trial. The two sued each other, later settling out of court. WWE announcer Corey Graves then took Punk to task. He posted a text on social media. Maybe abandoning everybody who stood by your side, even when we weren't supposed to, only to have you turn your back on us, wasn't the right move after all? No anger, only sadness. Graves said that Punk gave him the cold shoulder when he tried to meet up with him after a WWE show in Punk's hometown of Chicago. Punk allegedly said he was no longer interested in contact with WWE employees. Graves continued, "The #1 rule of punk rock is loyalty, and this guy has betrayed everyone."
Do you think there's ever a chance we'll see you back in a squared circle?
No.
Punk was done with wrestling. He now sought his attention and spotlight elsewhere. In the Octagon, he announced his intention to become a UFC fighter. Wrestlers like Batista, Bobby Lashley, and Brock Lesnar had already achieved great success in combat sports. Brock Lesnar even became UFC champion. But next to them, Punk didn't look like a dangerous fighter. In an interview, host Michael Landsberg referred to him as an entertainer. Punk found this disrespectful and reacted visibly annoyed.
Are you kind of pissed off with the questions that I've asked?
They're very wrestling centric, and I'm here to talk about UFC. You have an agenda.
Oh, I don't have an agenda, but what am I going to ask you about UFC? You're not a UFC fighter.
And you're laughing about that, and you have me on your show making a joke of the situation.
One thing was clear though, CM Punk was very good with words, and so Punk engaged the host in a verbal fight. The usually quick-witted Landsberg was no match for Punk. For every quip, there was a better comeback.
Try to act like the cool kid in school. I
See
like your
that?
gimmick, kid.
No,
I love it. I love it.
No, you don't love it, first of all. And it is disrespectful somewhat to be drinking coffee or tea while you're in the middle of an interview.
I got to stay awake on TSN. I need my caffeine.
And I'm looking forward to saying goodbye so I can go back to being the nice guy that apparently you accused me of being.
I'm sure you've been accused of a lot worse.
On the mic, Punk remained undefeated, even in the UFC. At a UFC convention, a fan provoked him. Where others would have reacted with professional distance, Punk gave in to his anger and fought back with insults.
Are you finished?
No, I'm here all day, but guess who's finished? You are.
All right, to stay away from the Mexican.
Bye-bye. Oh, you're a Mexican? Oh, I feel bad for all the other cool Mexicans I know. I'm on the stage. Get the fuck out.
In September 2016, Punk had his first UFC fight. At the weigh-in, he refused to shake hands with his opponent. He acted cocky and self-confident, only to be dominated by Mickey Gall in the fight. Punk lost decisively, and everyone who had laughed at him before kept laughing. After the fight, he appeared emotionally distraught at the press conference.
I'm just really, really hard on myself. I lost, and it sucks. And it was lopsided, and it's upsetting.
Stephanie McMahon used Punk's loss as ammunition to fire back. She put an end to the CM Punk chants that night.
So if you guys could keep that up for about 2 minutes and 15 seconds, you'd last 1 second longer than Punk did.
Punk also clearly lost his second fight. Twice he tried to be a real fighter. Twice he failed spectacularly. Punk then retreated from the public eye, but over time began to miss the spotlight. He wanted to stick to his word and never wrestle again, but then did it anyway, unrecognized. Punk interfered in a match in the small independent promotion MKE Wrestling, wearing a mask. But his signature move, the go to sleep, was noticeably sloppy. For him, it was worth it. Those few seconds back in the spotlight were like a relapse where he felt alive. August 20th, 2021. A big day for the 2-year-old promotion All Elite Wrestling. Right at the start of the show, Punk blew the roof off the arena. CM Punk was back in wrestling. His comeback took his breath away. Thousands of times he had envisioned this moment. Now, he was experiencing it. He was moved to tears. The entire world celebrated his return.
I'm back.
At first, wrestlers backstage were hyped to have him on the roster. Everyone thought Punk had become more professional by now. He said as much in interviews.
I would be confrontational when there's maybe no need to be confrontational. If somebody cuts you off in traffic, like, really, who gives a shit? You're gonna see him at the red light, and people who are racing to that red light, like, I'm not racing to that red light anymore.
What he was saying soon turned out to be wishful thinking. He foreshadowed his own scandals. CM Punk is considered a master of artfully blurring fiction and reality. Punk taught his new co-workers to bring reality into the public eye, and so they did.
You claimed you'd only come back for the younger talent, and yet you also claimed you'd only come back for a boatload of money.
For Punk, shoot promos are quite normal, but this strategy of incorporating real conflicts in the shows eventually backfired. Behind the scenes at AEW, tensions were at a boiling point after Punk's comeback, because his former best friend, Colt Cabana, worked in the same promotion. Everyone knew about their falling out. Cabana didn't want their conflict to affect his career, so he tried to reconcile with his former best friend.
And he was like, hey, can we talk so it's not weird between us? And I just said, I won't ever talk to you without a lawyer present. That's egos, is what it is.
Punk strictly blocked all of Cabana's attempts at reconciliation. According to various media reports, Punk was allegedly bothered by Cabana working at AEW. He didn't want to constantly share a backstage area with him. Rumors suggest Punk demanded Cabana's termination. Boss Tony Khan listened to Punk, took some time to strategize, and went along with it. After all, he didn't want to anger Punk, who was his biggest and most important star at the time. He almost fired Cabana, but an arrangement was made. He was transferred to the smaller sister promotion, Ring of Honor. At a press conference, Tony Khan refused to answer the question of whether this had anything to do with Punk. The Wrestling Observer reports that the handling of Cabana was the basis for many further conflicts, because Colt Cabana had many friends in the locker room. The wrestlers liked him. Adam Page, for example, was beside himself over the allegedly unfair treatment of his friend, Cabana. Adam Page's reaction added fuel to the fire. In a promo, he fired shots at Punk without prior agreement, giving him a taste of his own medicine.
You talk a big game about workers' rights, yeah? Well, you've shown the exact opposite since you've gotten here. I love this place. I care about this place. This is my home. I will be defending all elite wrestling from you.
Page portrayed Punk as a hypocrite who behaved completely differently behind the scenes than in front of the camera. These noticeably hostile remarks exploded like bombshells over the wrestling landscape. Fans and media speculated how much of what he was saying was real. It later became evident there was a personal animosity behind it. Before a match with Moxley, Punk addressed Adam Page. He called him out to come to the ring. According to media reports, this action was neither planned nor agreed upon. No one knew what had gotten into Punk at the time. The general interpretation was that Punk wanted to deliberately embarrass Page, but Adam Page was sitting at catering and didn't catch any of it. Like Colt Cabana, Adam Page also tried to de-escalate the conflict. He apologized to Punk behind the scenes, but Punk wanted none of it, responding again with a shoot-style promo in the ring.
A little bit of advice, and I suggest you take. The apology must be as loud and as public as the disrespect.
In a scandalous press conference, Punk burst the bubble. Then, an angry reckoning. He fired live rounds, first at Adam Page.
Our locker room isn't worth when you have an empty-headed idiot who's never done anything in the business do public interviews and say, no, I don't really take advice.
Oh boy, I don't know. I'm stubborn. I don't take it.
It's a disgrace to this industry. It's a disgrace to this company. I'm tired of wrestling these kids that think they know everything.
What bothered Punk the most was that Page didn't subordinate himself to him, that he didn't follow his advice. He had a hard time dealing with that.
He wants to be the guy who everybody looks to for advice, for direction. He wants to be the guy who's the leader.
But the public mudslinging continued. Punk also attacked the Young Bucks and Kenny Omega, the so-called EVPs, wrestlers with management responsibilities. In his eyes, he was the only EVP, the MVP. He knew how the business worked. Everyone should subordinate themselves to him, his advice, and his tips. Kenny Omega and the Young Bucks were confused by how he was acting. They wanted to be treated as equals and not be looked down upon.
And the fact that I have to sit up here because we have irresponsible people who call themselves EVPs and couldn't manage a target, and they spread lies and put into a media that I got somebody fired when I have all to do with him. Embarrassing.
Tensions kept growing until shortly after, all hell broke loose.
And a huge brawl broke out. The brawl involving CM Punk, the Young Bucks, Kenny Omega.
The Young Bucks reportedly stormed into Punk's locker room along with Kenny Omega. First a confrontation, then it turned into a brawl. Allegedly, it was Punk who first took a swing at Matt Jackson. Rumors spread like wildfire. It was also a hot topic behind the scenes at WWE, amusement mixed with criticism. Some found Punk's behavior selfish and arrogant. He was the opposite of a locker room leader. Tony Khan's passivity in the matter was another point of perplexity. Why did he sit idly by and let Punk insult his colleagues? AEW co-founder Cody Rhodes expressed disappointment about Punk's press conference in an interview.
I just hated seeing that because it was just a bump. That's not how we envisioned it.
Meanwhile, WWE officials realized their competitor, Tony Khan, was not in control of his company, Punk was. Fox employees who had dealt with Punk also confirmed that he was difficult to work with. WWE laughed, mocked AEW's unprofessionalism, and CM Punk stood in the eye of the storm. In response, Tony Khan suspended everyone involved in the dispute. The solution then was to separate the quarrelers and only have them appear on different shows. Punk got his own TV show with Collision.
I'm tired of being nice. Tell me when you're telling lies.
He deliberately kept friends of the Young Bucks away, including Christopher Daniels and Dolph Ziggler's brother, Ryan Nemeth.
But until there is somebody in this company that can fill these boots, they belong on my feet. Tell me when you're telling lies.
To this day, the conflict hasn't been resolved. A big personal meeting for a discussion was cancelled. Kenny Omega in particular tried to settle the dispute, but Punk remained obstinate. Not everyone dares to shoot so offensively against colleagues in a press conference. That's what fans love about him, that he dares, that he doesn't give in to conventions, that he defies expectations. At WWE, Punk always demanded more creative freedom. But the price of this creative freedom can be very high, as became clear in AEW. The lesson was clear. If everyone is allowed to say anything, they can also make real accusations, which leads to real conflicts that escalate in public. The last chapter of Punk's time in All Elite Wrestling ended abruptly. He made his last appearance in 2023 at All in London in a match against Samoa Joe. When Punk arrived in London, there was no driver waiting for him at the airport. Once again, he got worked up about the company's unprofessionalism. He had to take the tube. He left his match with Samoa Joe with his finger up, the gesture of WWE's top guy Roman Reigns. Punk wanted to make it clear that he was still the best. Shortly after, Tony Khan fired him, because there was another brawl. In the weeks leading up to this point, another dispute had been brewing. Jack Perry wanted to do various high-risk spots, including one with real glass. Punk reprimanded him and tried to forbid it, but Jack Perry wanted to do his own thing, and that's exactly what he did.
Jack Perry does the spot on a real glass car window, and looks at the camera and says, "It's real glass, prime me a river."
That was more than enough to make Punk boil inside.
And I walk up to him and I'm just like, Jack, why do you insist on doing this dumb internet shit, like on TV? And he's just like, well, if you got a problem about it, do something about it. And I was just like, man, come on, man. You know, I'll fucking kill you. Like, what are we doing? I thought I was doing a responsible thing. You know, I didn't punch anybody. I just choked somebody a little bit. I turned to Tony and I said, this place is a fucking joke, man. You're a clown, I quit.
Punk's enemies, the Young Bucks, showed footage of the incident. They clearly positioned themselves against Punk.
If you've got a problem with Jack Perry, chances are you're the problem.
The other individual tried to make this entire show about himself.
There was only one logical consequence. Tony Khan kicked Punk out. A step that, according to many wrestlers, was long overdue.
Today I terminated Phil Brooks, CM Punk, for cause. This stems from a backstage incident at AEW All In last Sunday. The incident was regrettable, and it endangered people backstage.
Punk then reacted defiantly. He responded as he did after his last firing from WWE. He trash-talked his former employer, where others would say thank you for the opportunity and wish colleagues the best. Despite any grievances, CM Punk starts badmouthing, cutting off contacts. November 21st, 2023, Chicago. CM Punk is sitting in his house. He gets a call from the new WWE president, Nick Khan. Vince McMahon was gone from the company after numerous scandals. Khan was polite, but to the point. He asked one question: when are you available? Once again, CM Punk blew the roof off the place. Meanwhile, Seth Rollins was boiling with rage. He had just finished wrestling, was about to leave, but knew nothing about Punk's comeback. Enraged, he flipped him off. Once backstage, Rollins started cussing, refused to shake Punk's hand, and walked away, frustrated.
What I wasn't happy about was Randy had just come back from a long hiatus. That was his moment. We went out there and had a hell of a contest. Didn't really need him, but it's the most classic, make everything about me, CM Punk moment I've ever seen.
Randy Orton was also initially annoyed by Punk's out-of-nowhere comeback. Some of the wrestlers felt that their moments were diminished by his, that Punk was stealing their spotlight.
Throw that on the pile of disgusting CM Punk moments. But don't worry, he's not selfish. He's in it for, helping everybody else.
He made my job a lot harder, 5, 10 years ago. I don't like the guy. I don't know many people that do.
The WWE locker room was seething. Punk had to explain himself to a lot of people. The decision to bring him back was controversial, but according to media reports, those in charge assured that they had taken precautions. Punk's contract reportedly includes a behavioral clause, which dictates that Punk has to behave like a professional, respect his colleagues, follow directions, avoid public conflicts. Violations reportedly incur hefty fines or immediate termination. The locker room was in turmoil, but most did something that Punk often failed to do. They treated him respectfully, forgivingly, without bitterness. There were, however, some exceptions, most notably Seth Rollins.
He really was just a cancer to my career for many years while he was gone. An intentional one, you know what I mean? He was a parasite. It seemed like every time he could take a pot shot at me or the company, he was trying to.
Most recently, CM Punk had made fun of Rollins on Fox in 2019.
Seth needs to stop tweeting and realize that sometimes it's better to be viewed at as the fool when you shut your mouth or you open your mouth and remove all doubt.
Despite the long-standing feud between them, Rollins and Punk were open to working together. Both knew real conflicts make for fiery feuds on TV.
You wanted this place to die with the echoes of those CM Punk chants. You went on your buddy's podcast, tried to tear this place down. When that didn't work, you took every single shot you could to try to kill this place, and you still couldn't do it. And then you took a big chunk of change to go join the competition. How'd that work out for you?
These are promos, these are things that I've thought about saying publicly, things I've wanted to say to his face for a long time and haven't been able to, or have said privately.
Drew McIntyre was also negatively surprised when Punk returned. He said in an interview with the Daily Mail that he had often experienced Punk as a terrible person. But here too, they transferred their real tensions to television, and they enjoyed working together. Many praised their segments and matches. Their Hell in a Cell match is considered one of the best matches in recent memory. In the time following his return, Punk had his work cut out for him rebuilding burned bridges. For example, with AJ Styles. Punk had accused him of being a racist. Or with The Miz.
I was just walking down the stairs and he was standing there and we just locked eyes. He left a long time ago. To see him backstage, I was like, what? We kind of just buried the hatchet, I guess you could say.
Incredibly enough, Punk even had a reunion with Vince McMahon, which he describes as strange. When he was at the corporate headquarters in Stamford, he wanted to use the gym in the building.
Tom walking down into the gym. He came in for his daily workout. Yeah.
And what was that like?
He gave me a big hug. He said, "Welcome home. Good to see you. Let's connect after I work out." I was like, "All right." Haven't seen him since.
You didn't connect?
No. I'm a guy, for all intents and purposes, never should have even made it to the WWE. I've had roadblock after roadblock after roadblock thrown in my way. But not only did I get past those roadblocks, I did it while flipping off the people who put up those roadblocks.
CM Punk is no saint, but although he provides material for countless negative headlines, colleagues also have a lot of good things to say about him. For example, his friend Joey Mercury.
I got fired from WWE. My house was in foreclosure. Punk said, "Are you in trouble? Your house?" And I said, "Yeah, I'm gonna lose it." And Punk said, "No, you're not. I'm gonna buy your house." Punk wrote me a check and with 6 figures to buy my house. I don't know if I'm his best friend, but he's my best friend.
He was my friend. So, yeah, I'd do anything to help out Joey.
CM Punk looks back on a successful career. He's one of the best wrestlers to ever step into the ring. He's intelligent and understands better than most how wrestling works. But the self-aggrandizing tendency in his personality has always stood in his way. It says, "I know better. I'm the best. So everyone, listen to me." Punk finds fault in everything. He wants things to change. Whether it's in WWE or AEW, he wanted things to change because they didn't suit him, because they didn't revolve around him. Triple H and John Cena criticize Punk's egocentric personality. CM Punk says in interviews that he significantly contributed to the positive changes we've seen in WWE. Rollins scoffs at this. Critics like him argue that Punk left during the most important phase of that change. The truth is that Triple H and many tirelessly hardworking superstars drove the company forward. Vince McMahon's departure also played a big role. Meanwhile, all that Punk contributed to the change were negativity and hostility. Of course, he doesn't want to admit that to himself, but he hardly played a role at all. What he said came true. He couldn't bring change from his couch in Chicago, but others did it for him. And now, he's enjoying the fruits of their labor, and he takes the credit. On social media, many said it was only a matter of time before Punk gets fired again. People thought that pattern in his career would continue. But Punk is trying to do better, and so far, he's doing pretty well. Because he desperately needs WWE, he can't help it. His drug of choice is the spotlight. Nowhere else does he feel more at home.
I did it as me, CM Punk. What you see is what you get. I've never tried to be anything else.
I would say he's kind of a game changer. Like, there's guys that come along that change the direction and the whole way it works. He's done that. He's uniquely different than anybody that's come along.
I got a lot of pride, and I got a lot of heart. There's a lot of people who wouldn't be in the industry if it wasn't for me.
I think the main thing that makes CM Punk the best in the world is that he believes that he's the best in the world. And whatever excuse that you could come up with to deny that he's the best in the world, it's going to make sure that he proves that wrong.
Like, all these scars, like, I earned this. They'll criticize all these things that I've done wrong. The way I look, the way I act, this, that. But they don't realize that all those faults make me who I am. That's who